Secretary for Labour, is on the line. Mr. Khan, what are you making of the scenes you're witnessing?
Good evening, Ashish. I mean, it's all Londoners are probably horrified by the scenes. In Tooting, we had some shops smashed last night, and I've been in touch most of the day with the local police, who are doing a very good job reassuring the local business community and residents as well, but just keeping people informed of what's going on. And I know that the Wandsworth police have been in regular contact with boroughs around London, and also there's talk about police officers from outside London coming in to help out to make sure all our residents in London and also our businesses are kept as safe as possible. And also I understand, and you've reported of incidences outside London as well, which is worrying for all of us.
Mr. Khan, you're a human rights lawyer. You've campaigned for social justice. When you hear people talking about grievances against the police, do you think they're justified?
Look, I'm all in favour of people legitimately protesting against wrongs. I think nobody, however, can say any of those people who committed acts of violence today in the streets of London, any of those people who robbed, stole, looted from the shops today and over the last few days, all those who have burned vehicles and caused criminal damage and injured police officers were thinking about Mark Duggan or thinking about some of the grievances that it's been suggested that could be the cause for this. There is no justification for this. There is no excuse for this. The criminality we're seeing, the provocation we're seeing, the acts on the streets of London we're seeing literally 365 days before the Olympics take place in our city are frankly embarrassing for all of us who are Londoners, and I'm ashamed.
But you've dealt with cases before as a lawyer, and as an MP you'll have constituents who come in and complain of police harassment and stop and search, and they'll say that nobody listens to them and this is the only way they can have their voices heard. Would you accept that?
Sure, Ashish, and I understand the argument. Look, I mean, I lived through as a teenager the riots in 1985. I've acted for people involved and been at the receiving end of police misconduct, as you're well aware of. I mean, I'm aware of previous riots and disturbances in more recent years. What I say is this: there can't be any justification for people going into shops, breaking windows, stealing mobile phones, stealing trainers, trying to get into jewellery shops, trying to get into betting shops. I mean, with great respect, Ashish, these guys aren't thinking about police and propriety. These guys aren't thinking about the coalition government's policies in issues A, B, C, D. A lot of these guys are just committing mayhem because they've heard there's going to be trouble. They're using an excuse. Of course, I understand legitimate grievances. I'm the first person to say, of course, young people in particular should have a voice, a space, a safe space to have their grievances heard on all sorts of issues, whether it's unemployment, whether it's having constructive things for young people to do, whether it's having a proper, transparent way of complaints against the police. But this is no excuse for what's happening today and over the last few days in London. I think community leaders, members of the community, parents in particular, need to ask questions about what people in their community are doing this evening. I think the acting commissioner made a very good statement earlier on, which you showed live. I think all of us, whether we've got younger brothers, we've got nephews or nieces, we've got members of our family, should be asking them where they are this evening. They shouldn't be going on the streets, watching even as spectators, or getting involved in any of the madness that's taking place in London.
Sadiq Khan, Shadow Home Secretary, joining us on the line. Thank you for your time this evening. Now let's talk to Simon Hughes, the MP for Bermondsey, Lib Dem leader. Mr. Hughes, what do you make of the scenes you're witnessing on your television screens this evening?
This is not a happy evening for London, and it's another evening when far too many people are misbehaving and breaking the law and threatening and putting other people's lives at risk. And the response has to be very clear. I join with the acting commissioner of the Met Police. I join with political colleagues from all parties, including the Deputy Prime Minister of my own party. I join with the community leaders who are out there, like I have been and will be again, on the streets and saying nobody should be on the streets tonight unless they have to be there. The elders, the parents, the older brothers and sisters have a responsibility to get their youngsters home and not allow them to be roaming around, the teenagers and the young adults. And to young people, the message has to be, look, guys, don't think this is clever, responding to the messages and the texts and the tweets and the other things and joining in, attacking your local police station or the bus going down the road or the innocent person on their bike or car. This is your community where you want to be respected and you want and expect there to be homes for you and jobs for you and shops for you to shop in. Don't trash your communities, because they are our future, and that means your future too.
You know Bermondsey well. You're from southeast London. We've seen trouble in Peckham and in Lewisham, both neighbourhoods near to where you are, but you keep using the word community leader. Is there such thing as a community?
Yeah, there are very strong communities. There are communities in the places where, in my borough, there's been some trouble this evening in Peckham and in Walworth, part of both of those I represent. Very strong communities, very strong community leaders. There are people in touch with young people, fantastic youth workers, in the faith communities, in the Christian and Muslim communities and others. Really good people working in youth charities, really good people working as youth officers for the local authority, lots of good people, really strong communities. But there's always a danger that these days teenagers and young adults can just, as it were, escape the net of authority and be tempted to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. There are people manipulating. Let's be absolutely clear about this. There are people manipulating the trouble, egging it on, encouraging, provoking, and other people are being caught up in this. There are leaders and there are the led. And the leaders are the people who the police want to pull in and be after. The led may be caught too, and they must know that's the risk. But the rest of us have a duty to say to them, don't go there, guys. Stay at home. Come back, pull back, because it may look clever tonight to be with your mates in a gang of 150. It may be less clever if one of your mates gets badly injured, even less clever if other of your mates get locked up, and certainly not clever if an innocent person in the car going past or on a motorbike or in a bus finds themselves scarred for life as a result of what happens, or a business completely damaged. So don't just join in for the fun, whatever the arguments. In Southwark as a borough, there is no aggravation between the police and young people. There may have been an issue in Haringey last week, but we have good relations. They've been built, they're secure, they are effective. And so there's no reason for turning on the police or turning on the local community. It is a good and peaceable community, and only evil people are trying to disrupt that.
While we're talking to you, we're looking at pictures from Peckham of what looks like a war zone. There's a car on fire, debris and missiles on the street. So that would suggest that there are people within that community you were talking about who don't want to listen to anything that's being said. So how do you reach these people?
Well, I've been talking to my borough commander, who is in Peckham and who is a hugely respected police officer. He, like other police officers, are having to make very difficult decisions as to where they deploy their people so they don't put their police officers at risk. There have been attacks on buildings in Southwark, in Peckham this evening, and attacks on buses and other vehicles. You're showing some of them, and it's not the only borough where that's happening. So what are the ways we can reach people? We can reach people through organisations like your television channel. There'll be people watching at home now in Walworth, in Peckham, in Camberwell, in all the other boroughs, who will be in families where there will be youngsters not at home at this minute, but they will have their mobile phone numbers. They ought to get onto those mobile phones. They ought to go out and find them and do what dads used to do and mums used to do. If they can't immediately get them and bring them home, we can't have suddenly the communities we know and love getting out of control. Now, the danger is we all up the ante, that we all try and over-egg the pudding. I'm not into making a big drama when there isn't one, but your films are showing that there are events going on. I know there have been people attacked on the back of scooters and motorbikes. I know people have had their cars broken into as they've been driving along. I know that buses have been attacked and buildings have been attacked and cars have been attacked. It's unacceptable, and the community has to stand together.
Mr. Hughes, you won't like what we're about to say next, but it looks like this trouble is spreading to other parts of the capital previously not troubled by the violence. These are live pictures we're getting in from Croydon in South London, a building ablaze there. The Labour MP, Mike Gapes, was tweeting earlier about trouble in Ilford. So the violence spreading across London now to parts of the capital which have been unaffected before, but clearly have been targeted by rioters. Ilford in East London, the latest, according to the Labour MP Mike Gapes. And these pictures of blazing buildings in Croydon. Deserted streets. Onlookers standing by. These are the people the Assistant Commissioner was urging to return to their homes. Let the police, my brave officers, do their jobs. That's what Tim Godwin was appealing to Londoners for earlier. Parents, control your children, bring them indoors, and let us restore order to the streets of the capital. But that trouble spreading. This is a worrying development, Mr. Hughes. Trouble spreading now to Croydon and to Ilford.
Let me respond to that. You're right. That's the information I have too. This is not in one or two isolated places. I can't endorse too strongly the message. People have responsibilities tonight across London to contact their young people and bring them home as far as is possible. And those who have influence in our communities, whether they're in the faith groups or the youth groups or the communities or the local authorities, they all have to get the same message. We are in danger of trashing the image of huge parts of our city, and it's entirely something in the hands of individuals. This is not fun, this is not clever, this is not big, this is not macho, this is foolish and short-sighted, and it's a way of making sure our communities don't grow and prosper as we need them to do. So if you have any influence, if you're watching, please exert it now. I will do my bit. Many of us will do our bit who've worked in the youth sector, work with young people. Let's make sure that the evil leaders don't have lots of vulnerable young people to lead, and that the led are being led back home to safety and not led into trouble on the streets of London.
As Lib Dem Deputy Leader Simon Hughes speaking about the trouble spreading across London, Croydon in South London and Ilford in East London, according to the Labour MP Mike Gapes, reporting trouble there, and spreading outside the capital to Birmingham, another city reporting violence on its streets. These live pictures of another building ablaze in the capital, gripped by violence, with night descending. Police chief urging Londoners to bring their children indoors. Graham, Croydon wasn't on the map. It is now.
No, but it's not unexpected. I think there's been tweets and things on the internet, social networking sites mentioning various parts of London. I think we saw officers already deployed there, but there's some significant fires been set in Croydon. Obviously, some sustained disorder has taken place while we've been watching images from Hackney and Lewisham. Fire service are deployed, but I'm not so sure they've actually picked up. There's a fire at the back of one of the other buildings. I was trying to get my geography. I thought I knew Croydon reasonably well, but it seems that's in different parts of Croydon. We've got fires being set in different areas, stretching the emergency services from one part of Croydon to the other.
And these are not pictures the Metropolitan Police will want to see this evening. Croydon in South London, Ilford in East London, Hackney, Peckham, Lewisham, all reporting substantial trouble this evening. If they've been following the social networking sites, and if you say Croydon was a target, they'll have contingency plans, they'll have officers in place to deal with this, Graham.
Yeah, I think we saw officers on the streets as we cut to the live pictures. It looks like it's just by West Croydon British Rail Station. The first one we saw, there were officers deployed on the street. It looked like they cleared the street sufficiently for the fire service to be deployed as we picked the images up from the first couple of flames and buildings on fire. So it looks like they've got sufficient resources there at the moment to deal with the incidences of fire that we've got going on there. But spreading right across the capital, now down in Croydon.
How thin can they be stretched, the police resources, Graham? How much can they actually deal with as a police force
Well, there's only a finite number of public order trained officers within the Met. We've heard from Martin earlier they got what's called mutual aid in from I think it was 12 other forces, which are called British Transport Police. I saw City of London Police earlier on, probably Thames Valley, Surrey, Kent, Essex, all the home county forces will have supplied aid to the Met for tonight. So they have got a great deal of number of officers on duty for this, but that does stretch them quite thin on the ground from one part of London to the other. So they'll be watching the images quite closely and looking at where they've got the resources deployed as well.
And dealing with the criminal investigation at the same time.
Yeah, and also trying to arrest offenders. Once you start arresting offenders, you're taking more officers off the street then, because it always takes a set number of officers to go take the prisoner in and deal with them. Then you're starting to tie up custody suites and investigating officers, etc., etc. So it all becomes quite a long-winded process and starts stretching your resources even thinner. But a very difficult night for them, and it doesn't look like it's finished.
And this is New York, the closing bell on the New York Stock Exchange, about to ring. And our correspondent, Hannah Thomas-Peter, is in New York. Hannah, how did the markets fare?
Well, it's been another day of misery. You can see those numbers behind me. The Dow down 5.5%, over 600 points. The S&P 500 down 6.6%, nearly 80 points. It's been also a day of extreme volatility. The volatility index that measures that kind of unpredictability hit a 52-week high today. It's often called the fear index, and that's what people are talking about. It has been a wild, anxious, fearful day on the markets here, and it's not just been about the downgrade and the political row that's been going on about that. That has just been one more blow that's fed into general investor anxiety about poor fundamentals for America's economy, the high unemployment, the low manufacturing and the slow growth. And that is what people have been really worried about. It's been feeding in all day today, and it has been a torrid day once again on the market. Similar kind of losses, worse losses, in fact, than we saw on Thursday just before the downgrade.
Hannah Thomas-Peter in New York, thank you. Looking at these pictures coming in live from Croydon, let's talk to one of our reporters live on the streets of London, Jane Dougal in Hackney. We saw officers coming under attack with missiles, one officer being struck. What is the situation there now, Jane?
Well, actually, a lot of the officers have cleared out now. They've taken most of the vans and they've left Dalston Lane, which was their base a little earlier. They've dropped the cordon, they've let us come down here. Just further down the street behind me is Clarence Road, where there were a lot of standoffs going on between officers and many members of the public that were apparently rioting. We're told that they were throwing rocks, and you can probably see a lot of the sort of aftermath of it. There's still some people there that are gathering, and apparently there was a lot of looting that was going on there too. Joining me now is Lionel, who you actually watched some of this looting, didn't you? What happened, Lionel? What did you see?
Yes, I did. I watched earlier on while it was happening down in Mary Street. I watched when a lot of the guys just went into the shop at JD Sports. They kicked all the fencing and everything, and they went in. And then as the police arrived, you can see them all coming out, running out. And then obviously there was more people inside, and they were arrested by the police. And that's all I saw. I saw another place where they had glasses and all that. They broke in and they were throwing glass, all over the place. And that's basically what happened earlier on in Mary Street.
It's been quite tense, actually, hasn't it? It's been quite scary.
It is. I mean, even though I live a bit further out, it's you can still hear everything: the commotion, the helicopters, the people crying and shouting and all that, and all the commotion. But there's more happening at the moment.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people are actually running up the street. It might be safer for us just to move away. We're actually being told to move away because it's not safe anymore, and I'll just hand back to the studio now.
Can you get sticks?
Jane, thank you very much. Obviously, safety first call. Let's go to Mark White now, who's in Lewisham. And Mark, what's the situation where you are at the moment?
Well, it was a night earlier on, certainly, of some significant disorder around this area of southeast London. Residents now in the calm after the storm, really trying to make sense of what happened here. You can see just actually a vehicle making its way through bricks and broken bottles, not exactly healthy for its tyres, and obviously being told by the police that they can't go any further. You can see just some of the officers. There was a significant number of officers here earlier. These officers from not too far away from the Lewisham area. I think Wandsworth, they said they were based in. They were just about an hour or so ago in full protective clothing because of the concern that there could still be some trouble here, but it looks as though the vast majority, if not all of the people who were causing trouble have now actually gone and left this area, but they've left their mark. If Gareth, our cameraman, can just give you a shot. This is just one of, well, I say dozens, probably hundreds of bricks here. What they did was they knocked down some of the walls in the front gardens of the houses just to give them some ammunition to throw towards the police officers. You can see there are some of the sort of big neighbourhood wheelie bins that were set ablaze as well at the height of the trouble here. And further up here, just towards this area, one of the local residents' cars completely burned out. And just beyond that, further up there, I don't know if you can see it in the gloom, another smaller sports car, the pride and joy, no doubt, of one local resident here, completely destroyed now by fire too. And those cars that weren't torched, there were cars that were just simply vandalised, windows smashed, doors kicked in. I mean, it's an awful, heart-wrenching sight for residents here to have to come out of their homes and to see the damage that was caused so far away from that initial riot in Tottenham on Saturday night. No one down here probably thought that they could have ended up at the centre of trouble themselves. Well, let's speak to one local resident. Ashley, you've only been here 1 week.
Yeah, I moved in a week ago.
Well, welcome to the neighbourhood, as they say. Tell us what happened.
Well, it started with just kind of groups of people congregating in town, and then I guess the police turned up and sort of pushed them back, and then everything kind of just happened right in front of my house.
Yeah, so, indeed, you took some pictures here. We'll just, in a very ad hoc manner actually, if Gareth can just maybe zoom in on your camera there, you can see that's one of the vehicles that we just showed there at the, really as the flames really took hold on that car. And
the worst part was that the petrol started leaking, so you can see that the fire actually spread down the length of the road.
Right, and so that's actually what set fire to the wheelie bins and the other bits and pieces down the road there. I mean, that must have been a really frightening sight for you in your newly acquired house, wondering whether you would come under attack as well.
Yeah, I think when the fire sort of started to get sort of down the road, and there was obviously no way that the police could then get closer, you do feel a little bit vulnerable that how do you get out if then something else starts burning and you're in the way, basically.
And presumably in the early stages there just wasn't enough police officers here anyway to deal with the situation other than push them back.
Well, yeah, I think they did a really good job in that they kept everybody back and tried to contain it. And but when you're dealing with 100 people pushing cars and wheelie bins and skips and fire towards you and throwing bricks, there's not a lot you can do other than really contain it. So.
And I guess when you were watching the pictures unfolding on Saturday night, the last thing you would ever have expected would be so far south of Tottenham that you'd be affected by this kind of trouble as well.
Yeah, I've had calls from sort of family and friends who know I've just moved and saying, "Oh, this is nowhere near you?" And I'm going, "No, it's nowhere at all near me. I'm completely fine. This is a really nice place."
Okay, Ashley Culver, thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us on Sky News. So let's just leave you with a final shot of that car that you saw in Ashley's pictures there. It was a blue car. It's now, well, completely just burnt to beyond recognition. No colour on it, just the burnt remains of a small family car.
OK, Mark White in Lewisham for the moment. Thank you. This is the live scene in Croydon, that blaze ongoing as we look at it. The Home Secretary has said those responsible for the rioting will face consequences. Let's cross to Hackney now, and Jane Dougal. We had to leave her quite quickly, a short while ago, because she was in quite a dangerous situation. But I believe we can talk to Jane now. Jane, are you there?
Yes, we've moved to a safer area now, just a little further away. There was a crowd rushing towards us, and we figured it would be the best idea to retreat somewhat. We've just seen that there's been someone injured just during that clash. We're told that he's just got a slight head injury, but he's all right, just a member of the public. But joining me now is Diane Abbott, MP for Hackney, who's made her way down here. Diane, thank you for joining us. First of all, what's your reaction to what's been happening here tonight?
Well, I've been out this afternoon and this evening talking to residents, talking to shopkeepers, and talking to the policemen. Some of these policemen have been out for 3 nights running with very little sleep, and it feels like a war zone down here, and it's very, very tragic, because these young people are hurting their community, trashing their community. It's going to be very hard to get investment, to get confidence back. So it's a really tragic situation.
And it's not just been in Hackney, it's been across London, also we've heard in the Midlands as well. Why is this happening? Why is this feeling of anger and resentment that people want to take to the streets and smash up their communities happening?
There is no excuse for criminality. But you have, in some of our inner cities, historically poor relationships between young people and the police. People feel under pressure. We're going through a very difficult period, and I think some of these communities are like a tinderbox. But I think it's very important to come out and talk to people, and that's what I'm doing tonight.
Of course, on Thursday, there was the death of a young man in Tottenham, which seemed to spark this. I realise that there's an IPCC investigation ongoing, but do you feel that that contributed to what has happened, that there wasn't enough communication between the police and this man's family?
There is no question that the death of Mark Duggan and then an information vacuum for nearly 3 days was the spark which lit the conflagration, classically, all the way back to the original Tottenham and Brixton riots. Riots are started by a death or an injury or an assault between the community and the police. That's the classic way they start. No excuse for criminality, but they always start with a death of this nature.
Do you feel that the government has reacted, the coalition has reacted sufficiently to what's going on?
Well, I can say in Hackney, the police have reacted quite decisively, both last night and today. I think the immediate issue is to get a message out to some of these young people and their families. The looting has to stop, they have to come off the streets, and in the very short term we need effective policing, and I think that's what the police are trying to do tonight. But going forward, we need to listen to what is being said in the community. We really do need to listen, and that's partly why I'm out tonight.
Do you feel that Boris Johnson, the Mayor of London, should be here tonight?
Boris must examine his own sense of responsibility as to what he's been doing.
Okay, what do you think the answer is, Diane? I mean, I know you can't say it in a succinct answer to a question, but I mean, what does need to happen?
In the first instance, the message needs to go out to the young people to come off the street. In the second instance, we need effective policing, but then we need to listen, and then we have to realise that these are communities that are under tremendous pressure, and we have to make sure that we don't strip out all the social infrastructure, the jobs, the projects, the youth projects. We have to be very careful going forward.
Do you feel that the police have reacted sufficiently to all of the situations? I mean, there was criticism of their initial reaction in Tottenham when the rioting started on Saturday night. Apparently last night in Epsom as well. Tonight in Hackney, they do seem to have been prepared for what happened, but do you feel that perhaps they didn't react sufficiently on Saturday night?
I was surprised on Saturday night to see looting going on in Wood Green Shopping Centre, which I know well, and Tottenham Hale Shopping Centre, not for 10 minutes, not for 30 minutes, but for hours and hours. I do not understand how that was allowed to happen. In Hackney, I must say, I've been in contact with my borough commander all day, and the Hackney police have been effective to what's clearly been a situation of escalating difficulty.
What have you heard has been happening, and what have you heard how it started today? What has the borough commander told you?
Well, what the community is saying, it started with an attempt to stop and search some young people near Hackney Station, and the community says that there's a relatively small group of young people initially, but they all got on their phones and got their mates down, and it kicked off.
OK, Diane, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us and for coming all the way down here, especially considering the situation that's ongoing. The police have retreated somewhat from this area. There are still crowds of people milling around, but the situation does seem to have calmed down slightly. But as I said, there are still people out on the street, so we'll just have to wait and see whether it continues or not.
Jane Dougal in Hackney for the moment, thank you. On latest pictures you can see of the blaze that's well alight in Croydon. No firefighters at the scene as yet. The entire building is engulfed and up in flames, presumably to be razed to the ground. Trouble's also been happening this evening, we believe, in Clapham Junction. Mark Stone is there for us now. Mark, what can you tell us?
Well, quite extraordinary scenes, frankly, in Clapham Junction. I live just down the road from Clapham Junction. I've lived here for 10 years. I've never seen anything like this. And I heard there was some trouble and approached from one of the side roads straight onto Lavender Hill, for anyone that knows the area, and found myself right in the middle of 100, possibly 200 very young people. Most of them had bricks or something in their hands. If they didn't, they were just using their feet to kick in whichever shop they felt like kicking in. It was bizarre to watch, really. There was not one policeman there. That's understandable, given that a lot of them are in other boroughs across London. But headmasters, the hairdresser was destroyed pretty much. The windows of that Brooks next door, that was destroyed, and they moved inside and pulled the televisions from the walls of that. Wimpy just down the road. Bizarre stuff, really. I've never seen anything like it. And as I say, not one policeman to stop them. I filmed it all. We'll try and get it down to you a little bit later on. But at that point, they tried to take my phone away. So at the moment, I can't really explain what's going on there because I've moved back to a side street. But it's, I'm looking down up from one of the windows. It's amazing to see residents, quite elderly residents, in one window that I'm looking at now, just looking down in bewilderment. They can't really understand this. And I don't think that many of these young people are from the area. They seem to have come in from other areas. And it's interesting looking on Twitter. There was a message posted on Twitter about an hour and a half ago by somebody saying that there was some difficulties in Clapham Junction, and at the time, from people who were here, that was not the case. So perhaps rumours have been started, people have moved from one area to another, knowing that the police are stretched and in different areas, and then that violence is starting. But certainly Lavender Hill, just up from the station, Clapham Junction, 4, perhaps 5 shops completely destroyed. I think Ladbrokes got the brunt of it with those televisions being pulled off the wall. We have got video of all this, and we'll bring it to you as soon as we can.
Mark, was it simply destruction, or did you see any looting?
Yeah, well, looting in terms of, the shops that they
Mark, we're just going to stop you for a second there. We have to cross to Joey Jones, who's got some breaking news from Westminster for us. Joey.
Yes, the Prime Minister is returning overnight. He'll be back in Downing Street in the early hours, I think, and will be chairing a meeting of Cobra in the morning. He'll be obviously talking to the Home Secretary. Indeed, of course, he's already been in contact with the Home Secretary, the acting Metropolitan Police Commissioner. But these are gravely worrying signs, and I think that this has spiralled out of control to an extent that nobody within Downing Street anticipated. Only a couple of hours ago, I was being told that the PM felt that it was quite possible for the Deputy Prime Minister and the Home Secretary and the Metropolitan Police to control this situation adequately. But I think that anybody looking at the pictures that we've seen from all over London would recognise that for David Cameron to stay in Tuscany was just could not be sustained. And for that reason, obviously, he's taken the decision to fly back straight away.
And Joey, is this likely to warrant a meeting of Cobra, do you think?
Yes, there will be a meeting of Cobra first thing in the morning. That will be chaired by the Prime Minister. He's having discussions with all the senior figures within the government as well to try to get a grip on things. But I think obviously at the moment this seems to be well out of control, not just of the police but obviously of politicians too. There is no sign that anybody has an adequate response to this to try to stop the sorts of scenes that, as Mark was saying there in Clapham Junction, are being replicated right across the capital. And I think that it's a gravely worrying situation for everybody, obviously, but that goes for politicians to the very top as well.
Joey from Westminster for the moment, thank you very much. We're going to cross to Martin Brunt now at Scotland Yard. Martin, a huge situation now for the police where looking at the latest pictures from Croydon with another building ablaze tonight. How are resources being deployed? What are they saying?
Well, they're being very stretched, as you can imagine. We've been saying all day that the numbers of police on the streets would be vastly increased rather from the numbers that were around last night and the night before. But, you know, there is a limited number. One of the frustrations for Scotland Yard is that police, there are 30,000 police officers in London, and people keep asking, well, with that many officers, why can't you deal with what's going on? Well, only a very small percentage of those 30,000 are trained to deal at the very sharp end of confronting rioters in these situations. So they're restricted to that sense. You've had officers coming back today, and I've watched a lot of them quite wearily walking back into here after shifts of 27 hours. You've also had the suspension of certain riot training today, again, because there just aren't enough people to do that. And I've learned in the last couple of hours that there are now 12 police forces from outside London who are providing extra help, reinforcements, if you like, 300 extra officers from 12 other forces. That's a quarter of British police forces now involved. Some of them will be on the streets tonight, others will be held in reserve, but you know, it's very, very difficult for the police to try and work out where the next act of violence is going to erupt. We had a rather unprecedented development an hour or so ago when the acting commissioner, Tim Godwin, who we haven't heard from publicly since this started, although he's been here and at Goal Control, he came out and spoke to us, and this is something of what he said.
There is significant disorder breaking out in a number of our communities across London. As a result of that, we have a lot of police officers on duty. But I do urge now that parents start contacting their children and asking where their children are. There are far too many spectators who are getting in the way of the police operations to tackle criminal thuggery and burglary. And I'm imploring that people within those communities actually start clearing the streets to enable my police officers to deal with the criminality that is occurring in front of them.
Acting Commissioner Tim Godwin there, also asking people to check where their children are to make sure they know what they're up to this evening. Well, the latest incident that you're seeing pictures on your screen now, that's of a massive fire in Croydon. Our correspondent Mark White was in Lewisham, is on his way to Croydon now and can tell us about the situation there.
Yeah, well, we were obviously just a few minutes ago. Lewisham, we still are now just making our way to Croydon. A source now confirming to me that there is serious disorder. I guess it's kind of self-evident from, you know, the state of that fire, but it's not just that. I'm told that police officers are coming under sustained attack. Reinforcements from some of the teams that are here in Lewisham or a bit further south, heading towards the Croydon area now to back up their colleagues. It is a serious and developing situation in that part of South London tonight, as clearly there is no end in sight to the trouble that's been erupting across the capital.
Mark, for the moment, thank you. We're going to speak now to Peter Truman from the Croydon Gazette. As we just heard from Mike there, Mark White, police officer under sustained attack. Is that your reading of the situation? Is that your experience of what's happening on the ground?
Well, certainly. When we first got here, it was about 3 o'clock, and there were some skirmishes between the police and some of the youth, but certainly the police presence seemed to be more than enough. What seems to have happened is the police dispersed the groups of youths who then disappeared down some of the back roads of West Croydon and reconvened and started targeting shops and other areas which obviously the police weren't prepared for or didn't expect them to, which has led to the situation now. When we were at the fire, it was just a double-decker bus, but there were at least 100 youths in the area and no police presence whatsoever. And where there were police in other areas, there was certainly a lot of confrontation.
Are you aware of the building that's on fire that we're showing the latest pictures of? It's a huge blaze at the moment. Do you know what building that might be?
Yes, we were on the scene about an hour ago when we had to basically flee because it got too dangerous. It started off as a double-decker bus, and then just opposite there's a furniture store which we saw youth brazenly smash the front door in and start looting. It's believed that building has now been set alight, and obviously with the furniture inside it's gone up straight away, and then neighbouring buildings have caught fire as well. The concern is that area is right next to a residential area, and obviously it's been very difficult for the police and the fire to get down there initially because there are so many youths there with masks and hoodies who are basically doing what they wanted, complete acts of unlawfulness with nobody to keep them in check, and without that the fire's been able to spread.
And you actually witnessed people looting also, or was it simply destruction of premises?
There was looting. We were outside in Argos, which was about a minute down the road, where youths had broken in and stolen a variety of items: CD players, MP3 players, sat-navs. And an off-duty police officer happened to notice them and managed to scare them away. Certainly in the furniture shop, there was lots of people trying to steal furniture. Obviously, the bulkiness of it can make that somewhat tricky, and I think that's probably why they decided to start setting things alight. We also saw plenty of youths who had clothes and other electronic items running down the street, just wantonly looting wherever they could.
Peter Truman from the Croydon Gazette, thank you very much for your account there. Well, still with us in the studio, we have Graham Wetton, former Public Order Intelligence Officer with the Met Police. Can you believe what you're seeing?
No, I've been getting a couple of texts as well. I'm sitting here absolutely astonished. Even colleagues that have been in the police 30 odd years can't believe they're witnessing a disorder and destruction across such a wide part of London. And the building we just saw in Croydon, the huge one, that's a serious, substantial fire. Most of I think a lot of the fire services now were deployed to the second one we saw there, but that is a significant fire they've got at at the other building down on the roundabout.
But still, it seems not very many arrests being made.
No, well, I think the prime concern now is trying to just make it safe for people, trying to make it safe for the fire service to deal with the fires, make it safe for the public, going to look after the public where the fires are will be the first priority. Then we'll start looking at arresting people. You know, the prime concern now will be safety of the public, not so much arresting people. You can deal with that afterwards. So I think the prime concern now will be dealing with these fires, getting the fire brigade in so they can bring the area under control the fires, and then they'll start looking to apprehend people.
It does seem to be following a pattern, though, Peter Truman saying that they did mainly seem to be young people, some masked, some not, but that was the profile of the people that were looting and causing the damage.
Yeah, it is. That's what we've been seeing at Hackney and Lewisham, and there's obviously some sort of organised destruction that's going on across parts of London. They're copycats, and that's the concern for the police. That will stretch the resources very thin. We just heard from Mark there's the resources being deployed now from Lewisham across South London to Croydon. That's a fair distance to travel to deal with incidents like this, and that's what takes time, getting across London. Even with 2 turns and blue lights, it will still take them some time to get from Lewisham to Croydon and deal with the incidents that's going on, and that then stretches your resources even further. It's a finite number of public order trained officers within the Met. Even with the 300 officers on aid from the counties, that still only gives you a very small number of officers to police the capital when you're looking at 4 different parts of London that may be sustaining disorder.
OK, Graham Wetton, thank you very much for giving us your insight into what's happening and spreading across London this evening. As far afield as Birmingham, in fact, we've heard reports from the Midland that there are incidents occurring there. We'll obviously bring you up to date on everything happening across the country when we come back.